and welcome to the Atlanta History Center's virtual author talk featuring Shari, Lapena, and Lisa Gardner. I'm Kate Whitman, Vice President of Author Programs and Community Engagement for the History Center, and I'm glad you're joining us this evening. I don't know about you, but books like the ones Shari and Lisa write have sustained me during this pandemic. Escaping into domestic thrillers has kept my hand from doom scrolling on Facebook, and it's really taken my mind off things as I race through the pages of these books to get to the end. So thank you both for your work and for helping me survive the pandemic. You can purchase copies of Shari's latest novel, The End of Her, and Lisa's latest, When You See Me, directly from our official bookseller, Acapella Books. They are in the links in the chat to the right of your screen, and they're also provided on our website. As Shari and Lisa are talking, please submit your questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Lisa will get to as many of them as time allows. Shari Lapena is the internationally best-selling author of the thrillers The Couple Next Door, A Stranger in the House, An Unwanted Guest, which have all been New York Times and Sunday Times, which is London's list bestsellers. Her books have been sold in 35 territories and around the world. She lives in Toronto. Lisa Gardner is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 20 suspense novels, including The Neighbor, which won Thriller of the Year from the International Thriller Writers. She's an avid hiker, traveler, and cribbage player. She lives in the mountains of New Hampshire with her family and some turkeys, as we found out during the green room. Not in her house, but outside her house. Thank you both so much for being here. And Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kate. It is a big honor for me to be here today with Shari. I still remember 3 years ago getting the advanced reading copies for The Couple Next Door and sitting down to read. At that point, you were new to me. And just from the very first chapter, I mean, a book that opens with every parent's greatest fear, the baby has disappeared. And you're almost immediately in this neighborhood. And on the one hand, everything feels familiar, like this couple, their new parents, their relationships with their extended family, their neighbors, they felt like people you should know. And yet, on the other hand, each chapter left you with this new twist, this new turn, this new terrible secret. I felt like it was somewhat along the lines of Gone Girl meets Peyton Place. And basically, I just had to keep rushing through all the chapters to figure out how it ends. And I have to say, I was very excited then to get the opportunity to get to read The End of Her, which to me, much in the same tradition, is just an absolutely brilliant domestic thriller. The opening of that book, which I'd like to ask you some questions about, is now we get to meet, I feel like it's a little bit more of a slow burn. You get to meet this happy couple, but they're going through what we all know is a challenging time. Not just are they new parents, but twins and twin girls that will not sleep at night. And I have to admit, some of your details for what the poor mother Stephanie is going through reminded me so much of those days with my own daughter. How do books start for you? Is it the character? Is it a scene? Is it the plot? What brought you to The End of Her?
With me, I always start with a premise, some sort of idea or some germ of an idea that starts to get me excited thinking about what might happen. So The End of Her began when I was reading something online about an accident that is in the book where this man there's been a terrible blizzard in the States and this car is buried in snow and this man is digging out his car from the snow. And his wife and child get in the running car to stay warm while he digs it out. And he's not aware that the tailpipe is blocked with snow. And so, unfortunately, they die of carbon monoxide poisoning. So when I read that, I thought, oh, that's just, terrible. But it's also, if you wanted to have a setup for a death that might be a terrible tragic accident, or it might be the perfect murder. I thought, I can work with this. I can build a whole novel around the idea of this accident and whether this man deliberately killed his pregnant wife in the car or it was a terrible accident. So that's really what the book is about.
So I like it. You're starting with something that you've read, something from the real world. I admit that's often the kernel of the idea for me.
Yeah, me too.
A lot of your books really are more grounded in, the everyday world. I mean, one of the things I love about your storytelling technique is it reminded me of something Stephen King once said, that he can take us to the darkest places, he can introduce us to the most macabre, as long as his characters return to the dinner table and have Cheerios. because it's
Yeah.
just something everyone knows. And it makes it that much creepier that everything's so real, but so not right. You really start giving us, a pretty typical slice of suburbia. And there's the neighbors and what they're up to. There's Patrick, the husband, and his situation at work with his partner, Neil. How much research do you end up doing? How much plotting out do you do? Or are these the kinds of things that just start to unspool for you once you start the writing process?
I think I might have lost you. Are you there?
Okay, I'm here. I can hear you
Okay.
now.
Can you see me?
Oh, yes. So
Okay.
just how much do you plot out? How much do you have to know in advance?
I actually don't plot out in advance at all. I kind of wish I did, because I think it would make my life a lot easier if I did. But unfortunately, my brain just doesn't work that way. I can't think of what's going to happen next and next and next unless I'm actually in the book, writing the book, and I'm dealing with the characters and having them come alive for me. That's how I figure out what's going to happen. So I start with my idea. I start with a couple of characters who I don't really know that much about. I knew that Stephanie, the new wife, would have the twins, and I knew that they would have colic because I've lived through that, and I know how debilitating it can be, although I didn't have twins. But you know how you always want to make things worse for your characters. So I thought the only thing worse than one baby with colic is two babies with colic, or three. But anyway, so I knew that I would have a mom struggling with colic, and I would have a husband whose previous wife had died this way. And that's all I knew. And I knew that there would have to be a woman from his past who would be the impetus to get it all started. So I knew that she would show up, but I didn't know how until the day I sat down and started writing. And I didn't know how it was all going to work. And I didn't know until almost the end whether Patrick actually deliberately murdered the first wife or not. It's something I did not know, and I kept trying to balance it. So I had, teasers on one side, teasers on the other. So the reader is always not sure about Patrick. Did he do it or not? And I didn't want to decide it ahead of time, because I don't want to, if I know that he's guilty or not guilty, then I feel like I might write the whole book towards that point of view, and I might not explore the other options. So when I write, I like to explore all the options, and I sort of juggle a lot of different things. And then when I get towards the end, I decide what's the best denouement.
See, and you're my favorite kind of writer. I always feel like when you go to writing conferences, we fall into two groups. It's almost like those old Bud commercials of taste great and less filling, except they're those who we must plot. And we're like, no plotting. And both sides need to be exactly what they are. I'll agree with you, speaking for myself. If I know too much, I feel like some of the magic is lost, and I risk broadcasting it. And I think as someone who also does domestic thrillers, one of the things that's implicit in the worlds you and I are building is everyone has to be a little bit unreliable. So we're kind of trying to learn those secrets too, but they can't be exactly what they are on page one. It's not much of a story.
Different people do it a different way. I'm glad to talk to someone who does it the same way I do, because I often hear this. I know there's a lot of pantsers like us, but there might be more planners, because I quite often get this, you don't plan, and people look at me like I'm making it up. But honestly, that's just the way I work. And I don't think you can't, you are who you are, whatever works for you works for you. And, that's just the way I work. I like it because it keeps the excitement going for me.
Yes.
And I write to figure out where the story's going to go. Whereas I think if I were able to plan it out, I might not be interested in actually writing it. But I don't know, because I've never actually been able to plan out a book. So
I feel it becomes the incentive for you, for me, to show up and work, because we need to figure out what's going to happen next. So in the end of her, we start basically with three primary characters out of the bat. We have Stephanie and Patrick, the new young parents. We know they have their colicky twin girls. We know Patrick had a first wife, but we don't know much. And then Erica arrives on the scene very early on. And what struck me, from the first time she enters the book, there's just no holds barred there. You almost pretty much immediately, viscerally don't like her. She's manipulative. She's clearly greedy, bitchy, and bad things are going to follow in this woman's wake. How refreshing was that? Because sometimes it feels to me we have to start kind of soft and lead into how someone terrible it is. It was kind of fun to meet a woman right out of the gate. You're like, this woman's awful.
Yeah, she was awful, and she was pretty fun to write, actually, because with her, what you saw is what you get. Like, there was no, is she really nice? And we're going to find out later. We knew she was awful. The question with her was, what kind of havoc is she going to wreak? And we knew she was a dangerous character.
Yes.
Everybody in the book. It's not just Patrick and Stephanie whose lives she upturns. There's other couples in the book too, because she's a real opportunist, and whenever she sees the opportunity to get something for herself, she just takes it, and she doesn't care who she hurts. You know, she's very much out for Erica.
From a thriller perspective, what I liked about her is she definitely introduced this whole element of cat and mouse.
Mm-hmm.
You got right away that, you know, she had some, you know, terrible plan, but what was it? How to get ahead of it? And I like the fact that, particularly from Patrick and Stephanie's, they did smart things. I always think it's a bit of a letdown when you have some kind of evil, manipulative character, and then the other characters kind of play into their hands. To me, what you see Stephanie, you know, Patrick at one point is, you can tell my new wife all about my first wife. I love her, and I know we can do this. And it's like, go you. Now, this doesn't help them at all, but still, it's nice to read. But from your perspective, is there a kind of character that's more fun for you to write? Or like, who led you through the book? Who's the character that spoke to you the most loudly?
I like characters who are under a lot of stress. I like getting in their heads. So I liked actually being in Patrick's head, because I like being in the head of the person who, you know, for whom everything's going wrong, and they're kind of panicking, and they're under tremendous duress. I mean, and Stephanie too, she's under this terrible duress. So I like those characters. I like writing those and being in their heads. I don't know why, because I hate stress in real life. So I like writing about characters under stress.
So you're writing for you things that are escapism. It feels like some people like, oh, I'm writing like, you know, the alternative me, what they would do. And then there's some people that are like writers who are like, no, I need something not related to my life at all. Mm-hmm. Sounds to me like you're saying that for you, those stories are the ones that can just take you completely away from who you are and where you are.
Yeah, because I really don't know any people like that. And I have a
Thank
pretty,
goodness.
yeah, I'm a pretty straight ahead person, pretty normal. And I don't know any sort of crazy people with crazy lives. But I mean, if you look at the news, or you watch true crime or whatever, it's crazy what people get up to in real life. You know, unfortunately, I don't know any of these people, but they're great fodder, you know, when you're thinking of writing a story.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into publishing. You know, what kind of got you into this mess?
Well, I mean, I always wanted to be a writer when I was a kid. I wanted to write Nancy Drew mysteries. That's what I loved. And I didn't become a writer for many, many years because I thought it would be a lot more sensible to become a lawyer. So I did that. And I really didn't like that. And I realized that the only things I really liked was reading and writing. So I became an English teacher. And I still didn't do any writing until I stayed home with my first child. So I decided to be a stay-at-home mom. And then I just started writing during nap time. So I just thought, you know, I'll never get a better opportunity to write a few hours every day. So I started writing at home, and that was, 20 years ago. And I started actually writing literary or general fiction, comedies. And I published some of those in Canada with small presses, but I'd always wanted to write a thriller because that's what I like to read.
Yeah.
But because I don't plot out in advance, I just assumed that I couldn't write a thriller because I thought they had to be thought out carefully in advance. And I didn't know any thriller writers, so I couldn't ask them. So I decided one day that I would just sit down and try and write a thriller without planning it. And I had this idea for The Couple Next Door, where the couple goes next door for the dinner, they take the baby monitor, but they leave the baby behind. And then when they get home, the baby's not there. And that book just, whoa, I mean, I tore through that book and I had a great time writing it, and I never knew where it was going. But at the end, it all kind of came together, and I had a great time writing that book. And I thought, you can write it, or I can write a thriller without planning it out in advance.
And that book was a huge, huge international success, like months on the London bestseller list, the New York Times bestseller list. So for your very first thriller, I mean, my hat's off to you. Kudos, because that thing was magnificent.
Thank you. Well, I guess I kind of thought about it for years, but I just didn't have the confidence to try thriller. I think thrillers are tremendously difficult to write compared to maybe fictions that's not so plot driven, or maybe it's just me because plot is hard for me, which I know people who read my books probably think, oh, you know, she says plot is hard for her. How can that be? But plot is kind of hard for me. Like, it's not something I can work on. It's just, you know, it's plot, I think, is the hardest thing about writing. So, yeah, I forget what the question was, but I do
How did you actually sell then? So, I mean, where were you when you got that call where, like, tell us what it was like to hear you were on the New York Times list.
Oh, that was extremely exciting. So when I first submitted this couple next door to my agent, she said, oh, you know, she was a new agent for me. I had left my other agent. I'd gone specifically to a thriller agent because I'd been writing non-thrillers. And, you know, she was very excited. She said, so I'll take it to New York. And she took it to New York the next week, and it got a preempt, and it was all tremendously exciting because, of course, in literary fiction, nothing ever happens quickly, and there's never, you know, it's just not the same thing at all. And, you know, it just went on from there. It just built and built and built and built. And it came out and sold everywhere. And it was shocking, really. I mean, no one was more surprised than I was that my little secret, because I wrote it in secret. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my husband. I didn't tell my agent. I didn't tell anybody. Until it was finished. And then I told my husband because I was supposed to be looking for a job.
Well done.
I'd been home writing for quite like 15 years. Yeah. And I'd had some success as a literary writer, but not any financial success. And, you know, the kids were getting into the later grades, and I thought, well, it's really time I went back into the workforce, but I thought I'll just try this thriller. And, you know, I haven't looked back. It's been a really good experience for me.
So tell us about your writing process. What's an average day in the writing life for you?
Well, I mean, it depends on where I am in the year. I don't know if you're the same. It's like when you're doing a book a year as a thriller writer, the year falls into sort of chunks. You know, I get my book in May, and then I start writing a new book. And then when I'm writing the first draft of my new book over the summer, I'm promoting the book that's just coming out. So I get up in the morning and I write for a few hours, and then I do a lot of promotion in the afternoon, evenings. And then, you know, when the promotion dies down on the book that's out and I've got a draft of the new book, then I go into like revision mode, and I'm doing that. And then it just all starts again, you know, and there's usually, not this year, but usually there's a lot of travel in there.
Yes.
But this year I have found, because there's not the travel, I have a bit more time. So I'm not writing as much per day as I normally would. I'm stretching it out more because I'm not losing 2 weeks at a time on tour and so on. But you were saying earlier that if you're not traveling, you're not as, you know, driven to get stuff done when you're home. And that's a problem too, because I realized today I'm actually 2 weeks behind schedule. Like, what happened? I've been home, but yeah.
I have a teenager, and she likes to keep me honest. So I was complaining, you know, early on, maybe April in the pandemic and the lockdown, that, you know, I had too much time on my hands, and, you know, the days were going on forever. And she's like, oh, so you're going to write 2 books this year. I'm like, okay, you can go away now. You know? No one wants to go to high school right now. Because no, I'm not getting 2 books done this year.
No, I mean, I wouldn't get more out this year. I would get less, if anything. But
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's one of those funny things. We're all a little less productive. So how have things been like for you? You're up in Toronto, Canada, right?
They haven't been too bad, because of course I work from home. I've always worked, you know, as a writer, I work from home, and I've missed the travel, but it, you know, I can't complain. My husband works in IT, so he's worked at home. So he's been home working full time. So we've been lucky. We haven't lost our jobs. Or my daughter had to come back from McGill and finish her year here.
That's the hard part, I think.
So I feel bad for all the young people, because they're getting hit really hard. So I think people our age, it's not, if you're working from home, it's not so bad. I think, people who are losing their jobs, or the people in the front lines, they're the ones that are really suffering. I can't complain. We've got it pretty good. And the young people, they're really suffering, I think.
Now, have you ended up like binge watching something on TV, reading more books, taking up a new hobby? I feel like we all have had a lot of nervous energy. And even though we're working at home, it's just a lot of hours there in a day suddenly to fill.
Yeah, and I find I am reading again. Like I early on in the pandemic, I was just watching the news all the time. I found it hard to focus on reading books, and now I'm back to reading a lot of books. So I'm happy with that, and I'm back to writing, although not quite as productively as I normally would. And as far as hobbies go, I haven't picked up any new hobbies. Although I've been watching a lot more Netflix.
Yeah, that's it. So what's one? Oh, see, the sun's coming around as I fear to it. So what are some of your favorite things on Netflix?
Well, I just finished last night. We just finished the documentary on the Madeleine McCann case because we have new information on that one. So I thought I'm going to go watch the old thing. We watch a lot of crime shows. I have to admit, that's my favorite is always the British crime shows. The Line of Duty, Broadchurch, all those shows, all the true crime.
I was watching Scott and Bailey and Scott. Also a British crime show. Excellent. Great police procedural. But yes.
I love the procedurals. I just love them. I've been watching all the Icelandic ones and the Swedish ones and the Norwegian ones. And they're great. They're very dark. And I like that.
Now, when it comes to reading, because it sounds like you yourself, you've written more literary, comedy, also thrillers. So who do you like to read?
Read mostly thrillers. That's what I like to read. But I also really do like to read nonfiction. Quite often history. I like to read things that interest me and inform my books. So like I'll read books about psychopaths, or nonfiction books on how to disappear. Or I read this great book last year about a psychopath who was a doctor who didn't realize he was a psychopath. And then he had this brain scan done for some study, and they realized he was actually a psychopath the whole time. And it was just so interesting about him discovering that he was actually a psychopath.
Oh my God.
So I read a lot of things.
Act on it? I mean, so did that like inform like his next decisions?
What's that?
So that he decided to act on it, or I mean,
no, he just felt that it explained a lot of the things in his life. The fact that he was a psychopath explained a lot of things, and so I like to read psychology, and I like to read history, and and I read thrillers, and I just read the last book of the Hilary Mantel trilogy, the Thomas Crown one. I love that. So I read pretty widely, to be honest.
Did you ever read, I think it's called The Psychopaths Among Us, and it's about not just the psychopathic personality as the serial killer, which is psychopathic with violent tendencies, but that so many of our leaders, corporate leaders, just that psychopaths are everywhere, kind of.
They are.
And the kind of stuff you and I are going to get a million book ideas.
This is our stock. This is our stock and trade, right? If they say that one in 100 people are a psychopath, and I read something yesterday that said, 3 in 100 people are sociopaths. And if you look at those numbers, you look around and you think, ooh, they are among us, and they are often in positions of power and influence and so on.
Yeah.
So,
did you ever read The Gift of Fear? Because that was the other one I thought was kind of very amazing for, if there's psychopaths everywhere, but we also have some instincts along those lines. It's just, do we, particularly we as women, stop and listen to what our inner voices are telling us?
Oh, I haven't heard. It's called The Gift of Fear?
Yes, and it's really all about kind of this phenomenon, and there's some case studies in it that women, we talk ourselves out of things. Like we meet a guy, or there's a guy over there, and he gives us a bad feeling, but we smile anyway because we don't want to feel rude. They talked about a rapist who was like getting his way into women's houses by carrying their groceries. And even when they tried to say no, he'd be like, what? You're too good to accept help from a friend or a stranger. And he would make them feel ashamed. So again, rather than going with their first instinct, which is, I don't want a strange guy in my house.
Mhm.
And again, the way we know the things we need to know, we just don't always listen to the voices
Yeah,
inside.
it's sort of that idea of women's intuition, or I
Yes.
think of it more as emotional intelligence. I think women have a
Yes.
lot of that emotional intelligence, but it's overridden by all these mores, and conventional things, the way we're supposed to behave.
Yes.
But I think if you listen to your intuition, there's all sorts of ways you're processing information all the time, not consciously, but all these signals that your unconscious mind is processing very, very quickly, where you're making a judgment about someone, whether you should trust them or not. And we tend to consciously will override that and say, oh, no, don't be silly.
Yes.
You need to listen to your instincts, I think.
All right, Shari, we have a question for you, and I like this. This one I think is a little bit of a challenge, but in a fun way. Okay. So, Shari, a random fun question. As a writer, what would you choose as your spirit animal / mascot, and why?
My spirit animal?
Yeah.
Oh, a cat. Absolutely
And
a
why?
cat. Oh, because they're so, they do their own thing, and they're very, they get everyone to do what they want them to do. They totally run
That's well
everything.
said.
I mean, honestly, my cat basically tells me what to do all day long. And they're smart, and I'd be, for sure. I identify with that. I like cats. Yeah.
So talk us through, so you're like me, so like I'm a pantser. So it takes me 6 months to draft a book, we'll say, because I don't know what's
me
going
too.
on. But it takes me a good 6 months of revision work. How about you?
Me too. That's exactly it. I spend half my time writing the first draft, and it's a mess.
Yes.
And then, because I didn't plan it, and I know it's a mess because I didn't plan it, but I can't plan it. And then I spend just as much time rewriting it and fixing it up and changing it and taking it apart and putting it back together. And about half and half.
All right, we have some favorite other questions. Okay, so what's your favorite kind of research to do for a book?
The psychology. I like looking into psychology research. The kind that I don't like to do is the the details on procedure and things that are different in different jurisdictions. So in this book, I had to do an inquest in Colorado, and
Yes.
it was really hard to get information on inquests in Colorado. I don't know why. I mean, it was easy to get them in New York and Ontario, but stuff like that is difficult. I don't enjoy that part. But anything to do with the psychology that I'm dealing with, I could read that for days.
Now, see, and I love the procedure. I feel like for me, most books start with, trying something new I want to pursue or learn something about. How to track a fugitive, how to, I'm learning wilderness survival right now for a book, how to light things on fire. Oh, this is a question. I'm not very great at this. What is your process for deciding a book's title? Because I don't even know if I have one.
Oh, I don't come up with the title generally. It's there's a bunch of us. There's my agent, me, my British publisher, and my American publisher, both of which have different people in them, and we all throw a million ideas around. And I can tell you right now, on book 6 that I'm writing, we've probably tried and gotten rid of 25 titles by now. It's just, titles are really super hard. The only title I came up with was A Couple Next Door. That was the only one.
That's excellent. And I have to say, I really like the end of her. And I think it's one of those great titles that when you get to the end of the book, it has even extra weight. Like it comes with, a lot of times titles are just, they're a good hook. But every now and then you get those titles, you're like, that really works on so many levels once you've read the book. But I'm with you. Often titles come from the marketing department. I always feel like I think in 100,000 words, I can't give you anything in less than 5. I mean, that's just not happening in my universe. So I am working on a book next year before she disappeared. And we just knew we'd have something along Vanished, Gone. I've already had a book called Gone. But when we did come up with it, there was at least that fun moment of, yes, that's it. I don't know that it was really a process as much as, I don't know, spitballing, but we got someplace with it. All
When you
right.
hit on the right one and everybody likes it, it's a great feeling.
Yeah, when everyone in the room gets excited, or everyone
Yeah.
on Zoom gets excited, I guess, the way we do business now. All right, so let's see. You say we like to read thrillers, so yes. The first question is, do I like to read thrillers? I love to read thrillers, and some of my favorite authors I like to read. I just finished Karen Slaughter's new one that's out now that I think is excellent, The Silent Wife, Lisa Unger. Gosh, I've read a bunch of great new debut novels. Riley Sager, I don't know if you've had a chance to read him yet, but he is
Yeah,
one
I've
of
read his book. I just had a chat with him last night, actually.
fun.
And I love his
Isn't
book.
he amazing? Isn't he the nicest guy too?
Yeah, he is.
And his new one, the green cover, The Haunted House. Oh my
Home
goodness.
Before Dark.
Home Before Dark. That is actually one of the scariest things I've read in so long. It was just
Because of the snakes.
The snakes,
Snakes.
absolutely. Because the snakes.
The snakes totally did me in. Yeah.
All right, and this is a good segue because one of the questions we got was actually for me saying that she read my book, Say Goodbye, which features spiders, and what kind of research I did on spiders. And that book, that is, I think, by far the most violent, disturbing book I've ever written. It is a good 15 years old, and I totally blame, at that time, my young daughter, who at 5, instead of bringing home books on unicorns, like any proper little girl, brought home books from school, like the Tarantula Keeper's Guide, and that's what we read before bedtime.
Ooh.
And you know, when you're a parent, you can't freak out about this stuff.
No.
You can't say, I
You have
don't
to let
read
them
about
lead.
unicorns. You have to be tarantulas. Sure, great. Let's read about those. And I was reading so many books on tarantulas, and then it turns out there's a whole culture. There's tarantula conferences. There are spider groups. There are people who are out there trying to raise and breed their own spiders. It's a whole subculture. And then that gave me a villain. Because I think, as you talked about, anything you read, anything you do, it becomes part of your process too.
It kind of worms its way into your head somehow.
Yes.
And you make all these connections. And yeah. But did she get over her tarantula thing, or is she still into tarantulas?
She's still partial to tarantulas, and I'm still grateful because I will say I can actually handle spiders. And all the research, in fact, I got to read about venom farms where they raise venomous spiders to milk them for venom. By the time you're reading all this stuff and you start to see spiders as little fearful things that don't really want to be bothered by humans. Snakes, on the other hand, is actually what I can't get over at all. So,
Yeah, I can't get over
that.
What do people do with spider venom? I can't even imagine.
The antidotes. I mean, everything comes from somewhere. So they literally raise spiders and they have to milk the venom out of them to use it to turn into antidotes. And really, people don't want to hurt the spiders, so they're kind of raising them as, I don't know the right word, like a farm. So, all right, here's a question for you, Shari. Do you ever get inspired when reading another author's book, or does it spark an idea?
Oh, all the time. All the time. Well, it's a double-edged sword. I get inspired, like when I read a book that I love, I get completely inspired. If I read something, I go, oh, that is such a good way to do an unreliable narrator, or that is such a great idea for how to twist something. But the other problem with that is I read it and I go, oh, now that's been done. I read, oh, now I can't do that because so-and-so did it so well. So it's yes, they're inspiring, but on the other hand, in a way, they close doors because you think, oh, that's a great book about X. Now I can't write about X. So I don't know.
I totally get author envy. So the first Riley Sager's debut novel was The Final Girls. And I read that. Yeah, I was sent the book. I'm kind of thumbing through it because I'm not sure what I think yet. And I remember like an hour later, my daughter walking by and saying, you can sit down with the book now. I mean, I was like literally still standing in my entryway reading it. And I remember by the time I was done with that book, I had such author envy. I was like, I certainly never wrote a debut novel that great. And that character just haunted me, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely get author envy too, but it's good because it makes you, keeps the bar high. You want to try to write the best book you can, and you hold these other books up that you think I'd like to do something like that, but different.
You've had some really great, exciting moments in your career. Is there anything on the Hollywood front or movies or TV you can talk about?
Paramount TV has optioned The Couple Next Door, so
That'd make a brilliant movie.
They want to do a mini series.
Okay.
And I think that would be great. I would be very happy if they did that. However, I have learned to not hold my breath.
Everything happens so slowly in those circles.
Everything moves so slowly. And when it first happens, you think, oh my God, it's so exciting, Hollywood or whatever. But, they just keep turning over the option and time goes by and, have other options and nothing's really happened yet. So you just have to step back and let what happens going to happen. I mean, I know you've had things made. That must be exciting.
I've had some TV movies. I've had a lot of excitement, even options, and then 3 years later, nothing's happened, kind of thing. You're right. I feel like in the end of the day, we control the books, and the rest is for excitement. So what is your favorite moment in your career thus far? Because you're at the infancy for all this greatness.
I think it was a really big deal when Couple Next Door was Book of the Year in Britain in 2017. So it was the biggest selling book in the UK in 2017, which to me was amazing. My little secret book that I didn't tell anyone I was writing. I was just so pleased. I thought that was great. Hitting the New York Times list was really exciting. My life goal is to be number one like you, but I don't know how you get to be number one on the New York Times list. But I've had some highlights. I've done a lot of travel I've been very fortunate to be able to travel. So, we were talking earlier, you travel a lot, I travel a lot. I've been to Dubai and Beijing. And
I would like to go to Dubai very much.
Dubai,
for the literary festival?
For the festival. It's fantastic. Yeah. And I've just been fortunate. I've had some real highlights in terms of travel. And I guess the main thing is just the people you get to meet. Like once you're a writer, like I get to meet you. Whereas 5 years ago, I would read your books, but I wouldn't be able to meet you, until I started writing thrillers. And now, like I met, Riley last night because we were chatting last night. And I think that's it. It opens doors to writers that you love to read. And that's something you don't really think about when you start, but now you get to meet them every time you go to a festival. You run into people that you know from the last festival, and they're people that you read, and that's exciting.
I will say one of the highlights of my career was in France. I got to accept an award from Mary Higgins Clark.
Oh.
And I mean, talk about reading like a writing god.
Like a hero.
I don't even think I could make eye contact. There was a lot of like withering it, but I mean, it was just, to think of this as a woman whose books I have adored for my entire life.
All through high school.
There are the children, like I can like rattle off most of them. I mean, and she was so lovely and so gracious and, and down to earth and human and wanted to talk about how to write books. And I'm like, I just want to like touch you a little, but I know that's creepy and I should just not do that. I will say in this pandemic, I miss the company of authors and I miss getting to see readers too. But
I do too.
Other people who hear voices in their head.
What's that?
I miss other people who hear voices in their head.
I do too, and because crime writers are just the nicest people, and they're so fun, and they're so supportive. And when you spend all year writing a book, and you want to cut loose a bit with other people and understand what it's like to sort of be home all year writing a book. But I was going to say the closest thing I came to that Mary Higgins Clark experience that you had was when I went to Istanbul for a festival, a crime writers festival, and it was the Para Palace Hotel where Agatha Christie lived when she was writing Murder on the Orient Express and everything. And we were on the same floor as her room right across the hall, and it was just so cool.
You can feel yourself getting smarter by the minute.
I know, it just was so great. And things like that. It's just things that you would never dream that you would do. But now
I got to sit at a table with Ken Follett and I drank his glass of water and I thought I was getting smarter through every, sip. I was like, he and his wife's amazing, nicest people too. So you were on the New York, the Sunday Times bestseller list already with The End of Her. What do you do to celebrate these great moments? Because you have so many of them ahead of you.
I always have pink champagne.
Nice.
I like pink bubbly. So I always have some in the fridge. Now, when I say champagne, I don't mean the real stuff. Like I'll have like pink bubbly rosé or whatever. I don't have to have the expensive stuff, but sometimes my publisher sends me the expensive stuff. But I just like to drink champagne and celebrate. You know, I'll go out with my agent because she lives in the same city, or, well, I didn't do that this year. So when this book, when At the End of Her came out, we were still under lockdown. So my publisher at Doubleday in Canada lives only a couple blocks from me, and she had a little backyard champagne party with 6 people.
Oh, fun.
So we just went in her backyard. We all stayed outside and had lots of nice cocktails and champagne. So, you know, it was a much smaller celebration than usual, but, you know.
So I have another question for you. As you write, do you write the dialogue as you go? Do you start with their narration? Do you piece it together? How do you do it?
I do everything chronologically. That's the only way I know how, because I don't know what's going to happen. So I have to sort of write it as it goes so that I can figure out what's happening. Actually, I can't imagine writing dialogue in isolation from narrative. Or
Yeah,
I just write the scenes, and one scene has to follow another.
I have author friends who do talk about, they write what they know and it's not chronological. I don't think I could do that myself.
I know I couldn't do that. Yeah. Because if I did that, I don't know how I would figure out what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, because if the story is if I'm using the impetus of the story as it goes along to get to the next step, then if I wrote out of order, no, it'd be an awful mess. Yeah.
So Shari, also a question, are there any Canadian authors that you would recommend?
Oh yeah, I mean, for thriller writers, I would recommend, let's see, Linwood Barclay's a big favorite of mine.
I love Linwood. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, one of my favorite thriller writers as well.
Yeah, in fact, it was his book, No Time for Goodbye, that actually, that's what made me say, oh, screw it, I'm going to sit down and write a thriller. That's what actually.
I love that story, because that's a great book.
It's a great book, and I love that book, and I thought, I got it, you know, because it's a domestic thriller. And that's the one I read, and I thought, I can do this. Like, if, you know, because I could see myself writing something similar to that. I didn't know whether he planned or didn't plan, but I just thought, now I'm going to try it, because it was after I read that book that I thought, you know, now I'm going to try it. But there are lots of new Canadian women crime writers coming up through the ranks now. There's Jennifer Hillier, there's Roz May,
Jar of Hearts.
Bailey.
I love that book. Yeah.
Which one?
Jar of Hearts for Jennifer.
Yes, Jar of Hearts, and she's
Excellent
got a new one out called Hurry Home. And Amy Stewart does really good books. There's a bunch of them. And, you know, I'm blanking on their names, but I have them all in my room.
I have to go look at them all.
There's quite a few new Canadian women crime writers I've noticed, just in the last 2 or 3 years. Hannah McKinnon's another one. Quite a few.
Right, we have one final question for you. This is regarding The Couple Next Door. Would you consider writing another book with Anne Conti in it, or Anne and Marker's daughter when she grows up? Do you think you will revisit any of your characters from some of these books?
I don't think so. I think that when I'm done, I'm done. With the exception, I do get a lot of requests for sequels, and I'm not really a sequel person. If I did any, it would probably be for A Stranger in the House, because that one has things that could actually all of them have things that could lead to another book, but unless I'm really starving for an idea, I don't think so. I think when I'm done with them, I'm done with them. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Is there any other final questions anyone has? And everyone sees the link so they know how to get Shari's latest, The End of Her, which is a fabulous novel. Congratulations on your 5th.
Thank you.
Book. And this has been so much fun. We've never gotten to talk before.
No, I mean, I've seen you speak at Thriller Fest, so now I won't be shy. Like, I saw you speak, I don't know, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but now that we've spoken, next time I see you at Thriller Fest, I'll just go up and say hi.
And I miss Thriller Fest. I so hope we can have it next year, and I hope we
I
can like
know.
hang out at the bar. Thriller writers, we're the ones you want to hang out with. We are fun.
We are totally fun.
I'll buy you some pink bubbly. And we'll toast to the success of End of Her.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you,
Pleasure.
everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.